Most people grow up believing that influence belongs to the loudest person in the room, the one who speaks first, answers fastest, and never seems to doubt themselves. We are taught to associate leadership with volume, confidence with dominance, and respect with the ability to overpower a conversation. But real influence rarely works that way. In fact, some of the most respected people never need to raise their voices at all. Their presence is felt before they say much of anything. That is the kind of power Stoicism Breath is about today, the quiet kind. The kind that does not beg for attention, but naturally earns trust. Think about the difference between two people under pressure. One reacts to every problem with visible stress. Their voice tightens, their energy becomes restless, and everyone around them begins to feel that same tension. The other person stays grounded. They pause. They listen. They respond with care instead of reacting on impulse. One spreads chaos without realizing it. The other spreads confidence. That difference is not talent. It is not personality. It is self-mastery. This is one of the central lessons of Stoicism. Your real power does not begin when you control other people. It begins when you learn to govern your own mind. Your thoughts, your habits, your reactions, your tone, even the way you carry silence in difficult moments, all of these become invisible signals. People notice them. They may not always have words for it, but they feel them. And over time, those signals shape how much trust, respect, and influence you naturally hold. A calm mind is often underestimated because it does not look dramatic. It does not demand recognition. But calm is not weakness, and it is not passivity. Calm is strength under control. It is the ability to feel pressure without being ruled by it. When emotions rise, when expectations collide, when a room fills with urgency, most people add more noise. They react instantly, and that reaction spreads. Stress is contagious. Fear is contagious. Agitation is contagious. But so is steadiness. Imagine a tense meeting at work. Deadlines are close. Emotions are rising. Everyone wants answers right now. In that kind of moment, one person's reaction can shape the mood of the entire room. Panic multiplies panic. But composure restores focus. A measured voice can do what a forceful one often cannot: bring people back to clarity. This is why leadership begins long before titles, status, or recognition. It begins inside. If your inner world is unstable, that instability leaks into everything around you. But if your inner world is disciplined, people begin to feel safer, more focused, and more willing to trust your direction. The Stoics describe this inner stability almost like a fortress of the mind, a place within you that does not collapse every time the outside world becomes difficult. That kind of steadiness does not happen by accident. It takes awareness. It takes intention. It takes practice. And the practice does not begin in dramatic moments. It begins in ordinary life. It begins when someone cuts in front of you, and you choose not to let irritation take over. It begins in traffic, when you are already late and every part of you wants to explode. It begins when you receive a frustrating message and decide not to answer from emotion. These small moments may seem unimportant, but they are training grounds. Each one gives you a choice: react automatically or respond deliberately. Each time you choose composure, you strengthen something inside yourself. Over time, that discipline becomes visible in the way you speak, the way you listen, and the way you move through difficult situations. And that is where presence begins. Not with performance. Not with image. Not with trying to look powerful. Presence comes from repeated inner work. It is the quiet steadiness people notice without fully understanding why. Friends feel it. Coworkers feel it. Even strangers feel it. There is something deeply reassuring about a person who does not get thrown off by every inconvenience, every conflict, every wave of pressure. They become, without trying, a kind of anchor for others. Ask yourself this: when tension enters the room, what do you add to it? More confusion or more clarity? More urgency or more steadiness? Because leadership is not just about what you say when things are easy. It is revealed by what you embody when things become difficult. Anyone can appear strong when life is smooth. But when frustration rises, when uncertainty grows, when expectations press in from every side, that is when your true influence is exposed. People do not only listen to your words. They read your emotional state. They interpret your pace, your tone, your posture, your patience. Your energy teaches others how to respond. In that sense, presence becomes a silent kind of instruction. You guide without forcing. You steady without demanding. You influence not by controlling people, but by showing them what self-control looks like in real time. So if you want deeper respect, stronger influence, and a kind of leadership that lasts, do not begin by trying to impress the room. Begin by mastering the storm within you. Learn to pause before reacting. Learn to notice tension before it controls your behavior. Learn to carry calm into moments where others lose it. Because the people who leave the deepest impression are not always the loudest. Often, they are the calmest. And as Stoicism Breath reminds us, true presence is not something you perform for the world. It is something you build within yourself, until one day the world cannot help but feel it. There is a moment most people never notice. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. It is the space between what you feel and what you do. And in that small gap lies one of the most powerful skills you can ever develop. On Stoicism Breath, this is where everything begins. Instead of reacting automatically to irritation, anxiety, or impatience, start by noticing them. That subtle rise in tension when someone interrupts you. The tightness in your chest when things don't go your way. The urge to respond quickly, to defend, to prove, to control. These are not problems. They are signals. And more importantly, they are opportunities. Because the moment you become aware of what you feel, you create distance. A pause. A buffer. And inside that pause, something remarkable happens. You gain choice. The Stoics taught that observation is the first step toward control. Not control over others, but control over yourself. When you observe your thoughts and emotions instead of being consumed by them, you shift from instinct to intention, from reaction to response, from chaos to clarity. Think about how different your day would feel if you paused, even for just a few seconds, before responding to pressure. Not suppressing emotion, not ignoring it, but simply choosing your response instead of letting it choose you. Because consistency is what transforms a single moment into a presence people can trust. Every time you respond calmly under pressure, you are sending a signal. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. You are showing reliability, stability, control, and people notice. They may not say it out loud. They may not even fully understand it, but they feel it. They begin to see you as someone who doesn't break under pressure, someone who doesn't add noise when things get difficult, someone who can be relied on when it matters most. And that is where influence begins to grow, not through force, not through authority, but through consistency. Even the smallest details start to matter. The way you pause before speaking, the tone you choose, the pace of your words, a calm reply instead of a reactive one. These subtle actions communicate more than long explanations ever could. Over time, they compound. And what starts as small, intentional behavior becomes a pattern others recognize. And once trust is established, something shifts. People begin to align with you naturally. Not because they are told to, not because they are pressured, but because they feel safe in your steadiness. This is what invisible authority looks like. It does not demand attention. It does not need to prove itself. It simply exists, shaping environments, guiding interactions, and influencing outcomes without ever needing to raise its voice. Presence is not something you put on. It is something you build. It is the result of calm stabilizing your perception, clarity organizing your thinking, honesty strengthening your relationships, and responsibility proving your reliability. When these qualities come together, presence emerges as a natural extension of who you are. It communicates competence without words, integrity without explanation, confidence without display. And what makes this even more powerful is that presence endures. It holds steady not just in calm moments, but in chaos, under pressure, when everything around you becomes uncertain. Imagine a storm. The wind is strong. The noise is overwhelming. Everything feels unstable. But in the middle of it, there is something rooted. A tree that bends but does not break. Its branches move, but its core remains grounded. The world will challenge you constantly. People will test your patience. Situations will shift without warning. But the calm you build inside yourself cannot be shaken unless you allow it to be. Marcus Aurelius described this as being like a rock against the waves. Not resisting emotion, not pretending nothing is happening, but maintaining stability through awareness and control. And this is where many people misunderstand calm. Calm is not passive. It is not detached. It is active. It is deliberate. It is the ability to feel everything and still choose your response. Because calm alone is not enough. It must be paired with clarity. When calm is combined with awareness, it becomes something powerful. It becomes direction. It becomes leadership. People naturally gravitate toward those who can stay composed when everything else feels like it's falling apart. They trust the person who can step back, see clearly, and act with purpose. And in those moments, when pressure is highest and clarity is rare, that quiet influence becomes undeniable. Not because it is announced, but because it is felt. And over time, that feeling becomes something lasting. It shapes how people see you, how they respond to you, how they trust you. Your presence becomes a reference point, a standard others unconsciously follow. That is how influence becomes enduring. Not through control, not through noise. There is a powerful shift that happens when someone stops trying to control everything around them, and instead begins to master what is happening within them. On Stoicism Breath, true leadership starts in a quiet moment, not in a speech, not in a command, but in the ability to sit back, assess what's happening, and act with purpose. The person who can do that doesn't need to dominate a room. They guide it, without raising their voice, without forcing authority. Because influence doesn't come from control. It comes from certainty, from steadiness, from the kind of inner discipline that others can feel, even if they can't explain it. And here's where many people get it wrong. They think being calm means ignoring emotions, shutting them down, pretending they're not there. But Stoicism teaches something very different. It teaches regulation, not suppression, awareness, not avoidance. When tension rises inside you, that's not a problem. That's an invitation. An invitation to pause. An invitation to reflect. An invitation to choose. Think about the last time you felt triggered. Maybe someone challenged you. Maybe something didn't go your way. The instinct is immediate. React, defend, speak fast. But that exact moment, that split second, is where leadership is either lost or created. Because when you pause instead of reacting, you take control back. And people notice that. They don't just hear what you say. They feel how you handle yourself. When you manage your internal storm, you begin to calm the external one. Your steadiness lowers tension in others. Your composure creates space for clarity. Your restraint builds trust without a single word being spoken. That is invisible authority. And like any real strength, it is built through small, consistent practices. Simple things, but powerful when repeated. A brief pause before speaking. A slow breath when emotions rise. A mental note that says, "Notice, don't react." These are not dramatic techniques, but over time, they rewire how you respond to pressure. They become the foundation of resilience. Even the Stoics understood this. They didn't rely on motivation. They relied on reflection, journaling their reactions, studying their triggers, preparing their responses in advance. Today, the same principle applies. Awareness, pause, intentional action. That's how ordinary reactions become deliberate influence. And every time you choose calm over chaos, something changes inside you. You reinforce stability. You strengthen your mind. You become less reactive and more intentional. Over time, your presence becomes consistent, reliable, grounded, and that presence starts to shape everything around you. Because calm is not passive. Calm is active. It is a force. It doesn't just sit still. It organizes. It directs. It creates clarity where confusion once lived. Imagine muddy water being stirred constantly. You can't see anything clearly. But the moment the water becomes still, everything settles. The particles sink. The view clears. That is exactly what happens in your mind when you cultivate calm. And from that calm, clarity is born. When your mind is steady, you begin to see what truly matters. You separate urgency from importance. You stop reacting to noise and start responding to what actually needs your attention. This is where real leadership takes shape. Not in controlling people, but in guiding them with clarity. The Stoics emphasized one powerful idea: focus on what is within your control. And when you do that, your decisions become sharper. Your actions become more deliberate. And the people around you begin to align naturally. Not because they are forced to, but because things make sense. Now imagine the opposite. A team where nothing is clear. Instructions are vague. Priorities shift constantly. People guess instead of understanding. Energy is wasted. Frustration builds. Even talented individuals struggle not because they lack ability, but because they lack direction. Clarity removes that friction. It creates an environment where people can think clearly, act confidently, and move forward together. When you bring clarity, you give people a lens, a way to see purpose, a way to understand direction. And suddenly, scattered effort becomes coordinated action. Without pressure, without control, just alignment. That's why clarity is more than communication.